Hey everyone, this will be a video over Swamp Thing's matchups. This is my first matchup chart video and I don't really upload videos too often, so depending on how this video goes, maybe I'll do more matchup chart videos. Now let's get started. 5-5 is an even matchup. 4-6 is a bad matchup for Swamp Thing. And 6-4 is a good matchup for Swamp Thing. Starting with Hellboy, I think that's a bad matchup for Swamp Thing, or 4-6, because he can leap just constantly, and it's kind of hard for Swamp Thing to deal with, especially when you get green thumb input errors when you try to stop him from leaping. He can also leap out of the garden, which is really bad for Swamp Thing, because normally you wouldn't be able to move or jump at all, but since leap is a special move, he can just jump out of it with that. Sub-Zero, I think that's 5-5. It's pretty much whoever gets momentum first. Like Swamp Thing, he can deal with Ice Clone pretty easily with his long range normals, but if Sub-Zero corners him, it could be bad. Cyborg, I think, is 5-5. Swamp Thing doesn't really have trouble versus zoning too much. He can do the slap under his projectiles, the back forward 3, and if he gets him cornered, it's pretty bad. His range really helps against Cyborg, and Cyborg can't really contest his range too much, which makes him have to run away. So I think that's even. Catwoman, I think, is a bad matchup. 4-6. He can't really anti-air her jump 1 at all, which is really strong, and she just low profiles under a lot of Swamp Thing stuff. And she can disrespect him a lot too on minus frames with just back 3 meter burn, because he can't break it fast enough with his 4-2-3. Flash, I think, is 5-5. Whoever gets started first pretty much gets goes from there in the matchup. It's really hard for Flash to get in on Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing's really good at keeping him out, but whoever gets that touch first pretty much rides the momentum from there. And they're both really good against each other in the corner. Green Lantern, I think, is 5-5. They both have really good range, and Swamp Thing can anti-air him pretty decently. So it's kind of like a patient matchup, and they both do equally the same amount of damage. So I would say it's probably like pretty patient, and it's 5-5 in my opinion. Harley, she doesn't have much range, Swamp Thing does, but he has to get in on her zoning with the gunshots. Once he knocks her down, it's pretty easy to keep the momentum going against her, but you have to get in on her first, which isn't too bad. So I think it's 5-5 for that. Batman, I think it's 3-7, which is really bad. 4-3s cross up on crouch block versus Swamp Thing. Batman can spam batterings, and I can't even do Abigail's Garden in between the batterings because I'll just get punished. So that means I can't use Vine Grab to try and absorb the projectiles and trade with them. So that takes away a really important option, which is unfortunate. So I have to get in on Batman, and Swamp Thing's walk speed's really slow. And the back forward 3 is probably your best option against the batterings, but it's still kind of tough. And even if you do get in on Swamp Thing, or sorry, if you get in on Batman, you still can't anti-air Batman at all, and it's not really that much better fighting him up close than far away. So I think that's a really bad matchup. Red Hood, I think, is 5-5. Swamp Thing, he has like damage and range over him, and he has to get in on Red Hood's zoning, which isn't too hard to deal with. His wake up game against Swamp Thing is pretty strong, so you gotta be aware of that. You gotta play a little patient in this matchup too. And you can also use Abigail's Garden to try and trade with the zoning against his Ninja Stars, so that's helpful too. Superman, I think, is 3-7. That's really bad. And I think it's 3-7 because everything that Swamp Thing does, he can't backdash or disrespect Superman at all. He has to pretty much take and respect what Superman's follow-up is, which is going to be 4-2-3 most of the time. Because 4-2-3 is 8 frames at the mid and it reaches really far. And part of what makes Swamp Thing pretty good is that he's safe on everything, and he can usually disrespect his opponent in some way, but he can't do that to Superman. And Superman can jump over his clones really easily, the projectile. Swamp Thing can't anti-air Superman at all. It's like almost impossible. And lasers are really hard to dodge at times, especially in certain distances. That was my phone. Joker, I think, is 5'5". Kind of like Cyborg, you kind of have to get in on Joker. Joker doesn't have much range, but Swamp Thing has range over him. It's kind of hard to anti-air Joker because his jump is just so quick, but I think it's an even matchup, pretty much. It's just like you have to get in on him and go from there. I think Atrocitus versus Swamp Thing is 6'4", which means it's a good matchup for Swamp Thing. He can crouch block under, or not even crouch block, but just duck under all of Atrocitus's vomit pressure, which means you can full combo punish that if he doesn't have trade out, of course, and if he does it for whatever reason. If he does vomit, you can duck under it and do down 3 and full combo punish, which is something no other character can do against Atrocitus, against blocking his vomit pressure. And he can punish Puddle with like 17% with Vine Grab, since it's -40 on block, which is really helpful. I think this matchup's 5-5. It's kind of a patient one, like patient matchup. Whoever like misses an attack pretty much starts their offense that way. Like if Swamp Thing ends up whiffing an attack or missing one, he has so much recovery on his attacks that Gorilla Grodd can like walk back and then walk back forward to punish him. And then same thing with Swamp Thing, he could do the same thing to Grodd, but he has to be aware of like the leaps and stuff. That's a pretty straightforward 5-5. Cheetah, I think, is 5-5. Same thing as Grodd, pretty much, in the Grodd matchup. Except Cheetah has less range, but more pouncing. I think Deadshot loses 6-4. He doesn't really have much damage. It's not too difficult getting in on his zoning. And once you corner Deadshot, it's kind of like a wrap for the most part. And you can't really jump as Swamp Thing as Deadshot. Ivy, I think, is 5-5. She can zone Swamp Thing out, but if Swamp Thing gets in, it's kind of hard for her to get out at times. Starfire, I think, is 5-5. Same thing. She can zone versus Swamp Thing, and if Swamp Thing gets in, it's kind of hard. Or not, it's not as hard as Ivy for her to get out, but because she has a lot of defensive options, Starfire does. But Swamp Thing can still do a good job at keeping her knocked down. Same thing as Starfire, he zones, Adam zones, I think it's 5-5. He zones Swamp Thing, and then if Swamp Thing gets in, he has the range over Adam. The only thing with Adam is it's a lot harder to keep him knocked down compared to most characters, because he has the teleport, which recovers really fast, and he has the back forward 2, which goes under attacks and dodges my attack sometimes, so I gotta be careful with that. But Swamp Thing has some tech against Adam, actually, that Decay, I guess, found. He does a down 3 into the down back 2 after a knockdown in the corner, and I guess it covers teleport, and it can cover back forward 2 as well, depending on how you time it, so that's pretty useful. So I think it's 5-5. Enchantress, I think, is 5-5. They both rush each other down, and sometimes Enchantress can zone Swamp Thing because she has the reflections, which actually reflect my log kick and the clone, which is kind of strange that it reflects clone. But they both have good footsies as well. Swamp Thing can decently anti-air her, so that's pretty even. Manta, they both rush each other down. Sometimes you might have to get in on Manta. He can throw harpoons, or it could be the other way around actually. Swamp Thing can throw clones and stuff. Swamp Thing has the range over him, but he's a little bit slower. Manta has less range, but he's faster. And he can't really use the float or the flight that much, because he'll take a big risk getting caught by 4-2-3. And I think the sweep is what really helps in the matchup against Manta, because usually Manta players, you can, after being minus, like say after meter burn laser, they usually do like back 1-1, which is a high. If Swamp Thing reads that, you can down 3 full combo punish that option, so that's pretty helpful. And I think he's actually one of the better characters for Manta in my opinion. Supergirl I think is 5-5. Swamp Thing has to get in on Supergirl's zoning. He has range over her. He can decently anti-air her a little bit. He just has to be careful with like her meter burn back 3, because it's pretty fast. So if I do any follow-ups after her being safe, for example, or minus, she can back their meter burn before I 4-2-3 and break the armor. Green Arrow I think is 5-5. He's really good at running away, especially with Savage Blast. It's kind of difficult at times getting in on Green Arrow, but if you corner him, it's pretty good. He can't really do much if he's cornered. And you can at least throw stuff at him like Clone if he's doing Savage Blast, or try to attempt to throw a log kick. So that's actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if this works, but I think Vine Grab might be an option. It might not be though, because Low Arrow might crouch under that. But I still think it's 5-5. Green Arrow also can't really jump as Swamp Thing. If he's ready for the jump attack, he can anti-air him. I think Fate is 5-5. Swamp Thing has range over him. Fate zones him out. Swamp Thing can anti-air Fate most of the time if he's ready for his jump-ins. And he really struggles in the corner, especially if trait is active, if Swamp Thing's trait's active. This matchup I really haven't played too much. I only played it a few times with Deoxys. I don't think I had enough matchup experience, but he thinks it's 5-5. I think it's probably 5-5. I can Swamp Thing can back 4-3 under the projectiles. It's kind of helpful. Really the only struggle is dealing with Beetle zoning. Swamp Thing has range over Beetle, but Beetle is really fast and he can move everywhere with the flight, and he can zone them pretty well. Firestorm I think is 5-5. Swamp Thing has range over him. He can anti-air Firestorm pretty well, and he can't use Molten Trap too close because he'll get punished with 4-2-3, so he has to be careful with that. The zoning isn't really too bad to deal with for Swamp Thing, but whoever gets the first touch pretty much gets momentum from there, because if you get touched once by Firestorm and he's at level 3, you could die, and Swamp Thing, if you have the momentum, you could possibly do the same. Firestorm. Aquaman I think is 5-5. This one's kind of a slow matchup. You gotta be patient. Kind of footsies based. If Aquaman uses trait and you go for like block pressure, you could do a lot of damage versus him when he has trait active. It does a lot of chip damage, and it's safe too, so you can either backdash or you can try and mash poke or something. It's a pretty slow paced matchup, and Swamp Thing can decently anti-air Aquaman depending on like where like what the situation is. And 4-2-3 is really helpful for anti-airing Aquaman at times and keeping him out. He has more range over Aquaman. He's just a little bit slower, and then Aquaman is a little bit faster with less range. I think Canary is 6'4". I feel like it could be 5'5", but most people say 6'4", so I'm just going with that. I think it could be 5'5" because she can parry, but it's kind of a risky option, so I think it'll probably be 6'4" in the end because she's taking a risk and possibly getting punished because parries are kind of hard to use. She doesn't have any range over Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing pretty much has range over her. She can jump at him pretty well. He can't really anti-air her too consistently. Canary, if she gets a touch on you, you could possibly be dead. That's why I feel like it could be 5'5" plus the parry stuff. But I'll just say it's 6'4" because of other opinions that I've had from other people. Darkseid I think is 5'5". You can, or Swamp Thing can anti-air Darkseid pretty well. The zoning isn't too bad, and Swamp Thing has range over Darkseid. He just has to be careful keeping him knocked down because Darkseid can easily just send him back full screen with his wake up meat if he meter burns it. So it's kind of annoying keeping Darkseid knocked down, and his ground teleport's kind of hard to punish, but it's not that bad of a matchup. It's pretty straightforward and mostly rush down. Wonder Woman, I think is 5'5", but it is annoying at times because if you're playing a Wonder Woman player with instant air shields, the diagonal shield, 4-2-3 from Swamp Thing doesn't punish that at the lowest peak or lowest instant air. She can like backdash his follow-up 4-2-3, so you kind of have to make a lot of reads in that matchup with against the zoning if she has the instant airs. But it's not too bad. He can deal with the shield bash pretty well because the standing one has a pretty far hitbox, and she has to risk, or she doesn't have to risk, but if she decides to take a risk using lasso, like back 2 lasso, Swamp Thing can down 3 under that and full combo punish depending if he's close enough or not. So that's pretty helpful. Black Adam I think is 5'5". It's a pretty straightforward matchup. Swamp Thing can punish Black Magic with Vine Grab anywhere on the screen, I'm pretty sure. He can anti-air Black Adam really well, depending on like the situation of the jumping. If he jumps really far away, it's really easy to anti-air him. And Swamp Thing low profiles under forward 1-2, and the whole forward 1-2 string, he can like crouch block under it, and he just completely goes to the other side. Black Adam like hovers over him as he's doing the string, and he can full combo punish that. It's just the only risk with that is you have to be aware of back 2, which is an overhead. But it's 5'5". Captain Cold I think is 5'5". Captain Cold can zone Swamp Thing out. Swamp Thing has the range over him, and it shows really easily. Swamp Thing can anti-air Cold really easily and pretty much keep him out really easily with the range. But if Captain Cold touches Swamp Thing once with level 2, it's that's any character though. That's the thing. Captain Cold, if he touches you once and builds momentum with level 2, it's really bad. But it's really hard for him to set that up. So it's pretty even, I think. And he has an invincible wake up, and he has good defensive options too. So Robin I think is 3'7". It's really bad. Dive Kick is really busted against big body characters because it randomly crosses up twice. It'll go like one side to the other really quick, and it's hard to block. And big characters get abused by it mid-screen, which is really bad because it usually only crosses up twice in the corner, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And on top of that, Swamp Thing can't anti-air Robin at all. He's too tall, so he always gets attacked from, or he always gets hit by Robin's jump attacks really easily because he's so tall. And even when he's crouch blocking, he still gets hit, which is really crazy because Swamp Thing has the lowest hitbox crouching in the game. And also, Robin's long-range normals are faster than Swamp Thing's, Swamp Things reach a little bit farther, but it's slower. It doesn't really matter against Robin. He doesn't care. In Robin's jump arc, he like does a cannonball motion, which dodges 4-2-3 from Swamp Thing, which is really helpful for Robin. And he's one of the few characters that can easily dodge with his jump. He has a really small hitbox when he jumps, so it's a really tough matchup. I don't like playing that matchup. He's one of my least favorite characters to play against. His big bodies. Swamp Thing versus Scarecrow, I think is 5-5. Whoever gets momentum first, pretty much, can go from there. It's kind of scary if Scarecrow gets momentum though, because he has trait which can wear you down. But Swamp Thing has range over him, and he can kind of anti-air Scarecrow, like maybe up close. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I don't really know where else to go from there on that matchup, because Scarecrow can easily just grab you once and keep grabbing you or pressure or whatever. With Swamp Thing, he can keep playing defensive against Scarecrow. Bane, I think, is 5-5. Bane, if he gets punished doing anything, like guessing wrong, Swamp Thing can hit him really hard, especially on debuff. Swamp Thing has range over him, and Bane can't jump that Swamp Thing. But if Bane knocks down Swamp Thing, it's really horrible, and it's hard for Swamp Thing to get up. So again, whoever gets that first touch can build momentum and win. It's scarier though when Bane knocks you down compared to Scarecrow, because he has armor and he can keep knocking you down. But if Swamp Thing guesses right once, then he has to make Bane come back to him and play the neutral. Brainiac, I think, is 5-5. I haven't played it too much, but Brainiac's normals are really slow compared to Swamp Thing's, and Swamp Thing can keep him out of the air pretty well. I use Abigail's Garden and use down back 2 if I see Brainiac jumping at me, because it has armor if you're in the garden. So that's pretty good for keeping him out of the air. Brainiac's drones aren't too much of an issue for Swamp Thing to deal with. And Swamp Thing can throw his clone out or his log. So it's pretty straightforward and it's not that bad. It's 5-5. Both have to get in on each other. Pretty much whoever has the life lead. Yeah, that's it for that matchup. Raiden I haven't played against too much as Swamp Thing. Raiden's just a bad character for the most part, so I think it's 5-5. It could be Swamp Thing's favor, 6-4. I only played one Raiden in a long set, and it was pretty bad when I played them, but there was some Raiden tech over the course of time, and who knows, like maybe it is even or 6-4. But Swamp Thing has range over Raiden. He can decently anti-air Raiden, and Raiden can actually never mind, take that back. Yeah, that's it for that matchup.
Leonardo.
Okay, never mind. Leonardo, I think, is 5-5. I haven't played the Turtles too much as Swamp Thing either, but from my experience that I did play that matchup, Turtles kind of have a big hitbox, so 4-2-3 catches them pretty easily if they're like jumping or backdashing, and their backdash is really bad too. So Swamp Thing has range over Leonardo. Leonardo has faster attacks but less range, and Swamp Thing can decently anti-air Leonardo, and the projectiles that Leonardo throws isn't too bad for Swamp Thing. I'm not sure about this, but I think Swamp Thing might be able to trade with those in the garden, or with the vine grab if the trait's active. Not too sure on that, because I don't know if he can grab them before getting hit by the projectiles. Raphael. Leonardo I think is 5-5, if I haven't already said that. Raphael I think is probably a bad matchup, because Raphael is probably the second worst character in the, or first like #1 worst character in my opinion. He's like the #1 worst character, just the worst character. Swamp Thing has range over him. He can't really jump as Swamp Thing. And, well, I guess Raphael has a parry, so kind of like in Canary's case, if he reads some attacks, he can parry them. It's kind of a risk though. So I think that could be 6'4", 5'5". In this video though, I guess I'll say 6'4". I don't really have any other opinions on that matchup. Donatello, probably say it's 5'5". At least Donatello, unlike Raphael, has better range. The thing with Donatello though, he's more unsafe than Raphael, but he has some pretty good mix, and his mix is unsafe, of course, but if he guesses right, he could hit really hard. So Swamp Thing has better range over Donatello, but Donatello has shorter range and he's faster. Swamp Thing is slower. Pretty straightforward matchup. Donatello's trait doesn't really bother Swamp Thing that much, so we'll go 5'5" on that matchup. And Michelangelo, I think is 5'5" because Swamp Thing has range over him and he could decently anti-air him as well. Swamp Thing, he out damages Michelangelo. Michelangelo, if he guesses wrong, he gets hit really hard. It's a pretty straightforward matchup, like they're both rushing each other down. So there's not really much to say about that matchup. Well, that's every character, so I hope whoever watches this video enjoys it. Maybe I'll do more of these, like maybe I'll do one on Grodd or Brainiac or Bane on the next video if I make another one. I'm sure I probably will sometime, I just don't know when. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you later.